You going first, Lowell?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, welcome to Malvern Books. Thank you so much for coming out today on this beautiful Sunday afternoon for John Domini's book release celebration. And John is going to be joined today by Lowell Mick White, and they will be reading. We'll start, Lowell Mick White will start with us today. Lowell Mick is the author of 6 books, novels, Normal School and Professed and Burnt House and That Demon Life, story collections, Long Time Ago Good, and The Message We Make of Our Lives. Mick won the Dobie-Paisano Fellowship and is a member of the Texas Institute of Letters. He teaches at Texas A&M University, and he writes really good books.
I'm going to stutter, which is...
You want me to move the...
Well, yeah, they might not want to look at my face, but they're going to have to.
Yeah, well, we gotta get you on the video. You sound
My mother was a math professor, and she had cancer, and math professor, stands up, and I saw her teach once. She was running around scribbling madly on the chalkboard, and then I knew she was really sick. She told me she had to sit down to teach. And it's like, so I know that's sort of the same thing when I injured my back. I had to sit down to teach instead of pacing around. And so a former student here, I never used to sit down. So that's how I'm sitting. I'm going to read today from Normal School. Normal School is sort of a sequel to my previous book called Professed. It follows one of the characters from it. Professed is an academic satire set at a large state university in Austin, Texas. And one of the characters is Tom Holt, who's a PhD postdoc. At the end of Professed, he gets a tenure-track job in far-off, exotic Southeast Kansas State University. And so this is 4 years later, this is what happens to him. I wrote this, the revision process for the book I did online. I would post things as I revised it. I think I had 48 different postings on there, 2 or 3 chapters each week, and so it kept me to a schedule. Then I took the website down, most of it, a couple chapters are still up, and now it's a book. So Holt's teaching at Southeast Kansas State, and he's not very happy there. He's thinking about applying for a job somewhere else. Then another professor disappears, and it's his ex-girlfriend, Devin Shepard, who teaches creative writing, disappears. And so here we go on page 5, sort of sums things up. So, look at everything that happened after that day. Look at the murders, the suicides, the ruined careers, the weird unexpected opportunities. Look at it this way. One day I was staring off into a corner, bummed, worried about what I might say to Devin, and then the chair just stuck her head into my office and told me Devin was missing. And then everything changed. Holt starts asking questions about what happened and finds sort of a loose conspiracy of criminal academic fuckwits. And we'll leave most of the mystery stuff out of it. What happens to Holt? Education also keeps going along during these several months when this takes place. Holt gets assigned to teach the late Devin Shepard's creative writing class. And one of the senior professors comes in to observe him, which is something that happens, as our academic friends all know. One afternoon, Nancy Buckley came to observe me teach the creative writing class. Observation happens to not yet tenured faculty on a regular basis. An old prof comes by to see if the youngster is having too much fun. I usually get observed once a year, but observation is going to happen more often if the senior faculty wants to give you shit. Devin got observed a lot by Courtney and T and Nancy, 8 times in her first year, and I think 6 times in her second year, and at least twice that last semester. Nancy gave me my first observation, a terrifically negative one, And afterwards, I usually got old Earl or Bart to watch me teach, and they were fine with my work. Nancy was already in the classroom when I got there. She was sitting in the corner, surrounded by notebooks, and she sort of squinted and half smiled, half smirked at me, like she was up to something. I shrugged. What the hell? I wasn't expecting too many compliments from Nancy anyway. I was teaching a class outside my area, a class Nancy felt like she owned. Also, Nancy was an idiot who idiotically thought I was an idiot. I got behind the podium and switched on the computer and the projector, and when it warmed up, I started the class. I introduced Nancy to the students, who turned around and squinted at her suspiciously like she was up to something. And then I went over the schedule for the coming week, and then we started discussing the student's story. And it turned out that the student's story was actually kind of interesting. It had the potential to be sort of good. Written by a kid named Keith, the story is about some high school boys who, as part of an initiation, break into the local petting zoo after hours and pet the wallaby. I glanced over at Nancy and saw that she was seriously pissed, pale, with thin lips drawn on a line. Nancy was the kind of stiff prude who always radiated sheer disgust at anything having to do with bodies, and I guessed wallaby petting must have sounded totally vulgar and masturbatory to her. Well, that was her problem. Keith, the student, wasn't being vulgar. He was earnest and thoughtful about his little story. It was based on something that had happened to him in high school. There wasn't anything dirty about it, nothing to snicker about, just a kid trying to tell a story about something that had happened in his life. The problem with the story was that nothing actually happened. The boys hung around with the wallaby and then they went home. But that's what we really did at my school, Keith said. We broke into the zoo, we petted the wallaby, and then we went home. Right, I said. I get it. But you might need to have something more action-y happen in the story. It has to be better than real life, you know? You need some action. You need some conflict. I looked around at the students, at Nancy. I said, so tell me, what can you do with a wallaby? Kill it and eat it, skinny, tousle-haired farm boy said. I could never remember his name. Take it to the movies, a girl named Jasmine said. Feed it a carrot, a boy named Jared said. See, I asked Keith, you can do a lot with a wallaby. Again, I looked around at everybody. I looked even at frowning, pissed off Nancy. I said, okay, get out some paper and write down a list of 10 things you could do with a wallaby. Then we'll come up with ways to make a story. The students got busy writing. Nancy was writing too, her thin brown lips pursed in concentration. After class, Nancy came up and squinted at me. She said, I can't remember. Are you always so informal with the students? Sure, I said, I guess so. Well, you might not want to disperse your authority like that, Nancy said. Disperse? Yeah, whatever. Nancy stared at me silently. Well, I said, after a moment, at least we solved the story's wallaby problem, huh? Tom, Nancy said gravely, marsupial sex is not the problem in this class. I'm afraid that you are the problem in this class. The next day, I found an envelope in my departmental mailbox. Inside the envelope was Nancy's class observation notes, and consider scare quotes around this whole next couple pages. Dear Tom, thank you for allowing me to visit your English 255 Intro to Creative Writing class. I found it very interesting. You began the class by asking how the students were doing, which is sometimes appropriate. However, you followed this up by telling the students how you were doing, which is never appropriate. It is important to keep a rigid distance between yourself and the students. Anything less than that will erode your academic authority. Never mention your life, such as it is, to the students. Once your pleasantries had ended, the class turned to actual academic business, discussing a student story entitled Petting Zoo. The story, which I was not allowed to read prior to class, seemed to contain many grammar, spelling, and punctuation errors. No mention of these errors, if they existed, were made in class, thereby damaging the student. The student's story was filled with ugly sexual innuendo, mostly centered around a marsupial. This innuendo was quite unsettling, yet it seemed to amuse you. Need I say that the university classroom is no place for marsupial sexual innuendo? Apparently, I do need to say so, because following the discussion of the student's story, you forced the class to write their own fantasy sexual marsupial innuendos. I observed that several students were visibly upset at this command. Marsupial sex has nothing to do with creative writing and was a bad educational experience for the students. Overall, I was very disappointed in your teaching. I am surprised that you have made so little progress in your teaching over the past 4 years. Your chattiness and devil-may-care attitude are damaging to your students and corrosive to your colleagues and to the values of the entire English department. However, I do understand that you are new to teaching creative writing and that you are not familiar with basic creative writing pedagogy. I am attaching a list of books I expect you to read by the end of the semester. In closing, I do want to thank you for helping the creative writing program with this ongoing emergency by taking over the late Dr. Shepard's class, and thank you, too, for helping with the department to the best of your abilities. Sincerely, Nancy Dumas Buckley, PhD, Professor of English, Southeast Kansas State University. What happens to Nancy? Person or persons unknown end up hitting her over the head with a softball bat, and she falls into a much-deserved coma, where she remains the rest of the book. Tom Holt's reaction to hearing about what happened.
Spoiler, man.
That's a very minor spoiler. Very minor. Also, I like spoilers because that makes me want to look forward to something. It gives me something to look forward to. Tom's reaction is, here's what, no tears there. Nancy was an evil and ignorant woman who did a lot of damage to the world in small, petty ways. Fuck Nancy. But something else. So several weeks later, Tom has to have an extended meeting with the provost, the dean, the department chair, the director of creative writing, goes on and on and on, and they've got complaints about it. That's not necessarily a spoiler. They've got complaints. One of the complaints is the teaching evaluation. So here's what happened. In this scene, the department chair, whose name is T, and the director of creative writing, her name is Courtney, and there's also a poet named Ted, who's a sexual harasser. Back in the conference room, Earl was gone, and Ted was sitting with T and Courtney. He did his best not to look at me. Good. I sat back down at my notebook. So, Courtney said, how are things going with you? I blinked. Today? Not today, T said. In general, career-wise, education-wise, teaching-wise. Pretty well, I said. I looked from Courtney with her black hair and giant eyeballs and sunken pink-painted cheeks to T with her tired, popped gray, cold, moist oatmeal complexion and thin brown lips. I said, yeah, everything's going pretty well. I mean, considering. That's what you really think, T asked? That things are going pretty well? Considering, Courtney said. Yeah, I said. Considering what? T asked. I said, considering that I'm overworked and under fucking attack by everybody? This was the kind of shit that Devin had gone through again and again and again, the class observation, the response, the meeting of Courtney and Nancy and Ted, then the next day or the day after, a follow-up meeting with T. But now with Nancy in a coma, I got to cut straight to T. Still, it was a useless time suck, but at least I didn't have to watch Nancy pull her fingers. Courtney said, yeah, and I guess you're still mourning Devin Shepard too, huh? Yeah, I said, I am. And yet you think things are going pretty well, T asked. Yeah, I said. For fuck's sake, I could see where this was going. Yeah, considering. Well, Courtney said, we think you need to reevaluate your perceptions. I'm going to make an official recommendation that you need to reevaluate your perceptions, T said. Okay, I said. That's fine. I stood up. Is that it? No, Courtney said. She blinked a couple of times. I mean, don't you want to know why we think your perceptions are wrong? Not really, I said. I mean, I already knew why. They were both full of shit, that's why. Why should I care about their full of shit perceptions of my perceptions? I sat back down. I said, since we've discussed all my other alleged problems, I guess it's because of that class, Nancy observed. He said, Nancy was very disturbed by your class. Courtney said, Nancy told me that class was very disturbing. All that endless talk about wombat sex was totally inappropriate. Wombats? I laughed, an honest laugh, and they looked at each other, surprised. I said, oh, come on, not a single person in that room mentioned wombats or sex. T asked, are you calling Nancy a liar? Nancy is fighting for her life in the hospital, Courtney said, and you're calling her a liar? T said, calling a colleague a liar is a very serious accusation. It's really unprofessional. Yeah, unlike accusing me of attempted murder, sexual harassment, slander, and atheism. Okay, I said, well, I don't want to be fucking unprofessional. Did they know I was mocking them? Yeah, I was mocking them. But maybe we can call it a deliberate falsehood, huh? Or maybe Nancy's just fucking delusional. But, and I slapped the table hard, nobody in that fucking room talked about fucking wombats. T and Courtney looked at each other again for a moment, silently. Ted finally spoke up. I think we should interrogate those students who were in the classroom and find out what was really discussed. Ted just wanted to talk about wombat sex with students, pervert. Sure, I said, go ahead. I bet we'll prove Nancy is telling the truth. Is that all? I asked. I stood up. Well, T said, she looked at her notes, Nancy told us also that your pedagogy is unsound. Yeah, I asked. Well, Nancy's pedagogy comes straight from Maoist fucking China. She runs her classes like a re-education camp, and I'm not going to do that, so yeah, whatever. T and Courtney and Ted all stared at me blankly. Finally, T said, you need to think of the students. Of course I was thinking of the students. I was thinking that I was going to give every single one of them an A. You know, I said, if you people don't like how I'm teaching creative writing, you can go ahead and pull me out of the classes, okay? Just get somebody else to teach those classes. I mean, really, do it. You won't hurt my feelings. He othered us, Ted whispered to Courtney. She nodded. Well, I'm going to make an official note that you need to reconsider your perceptions, T said. And this note and Nancy's letter will both go into your tenure file. The tenure file. You know, maybe 4 years earlier, fuck, maybe even a year earlier, I might have cared about that, cared about tenure. But now, after everything, after witnessing Devin's bullying, after her fucking murder, after my realization of the shit I lived in, after the dick pics and Fred's suicide, after my show trial, all tenure meant to me was being forced to spend the rest of my professional life with a pack of dimwit criminal fuckwads. Fuck tenure. Give me martyrdom. Give me freedom. Okay, I said, I can live with that. I stood up and headed for the door. Yeah, that chapter. So, read it.